Teenagers are often frustrated with their parents for the rules they need to follow, and parents get frustrated sometimes with their kids not following the rules. Well, today's guest is 20 years of age, used to be a teenager not that long ago, and has some helpful advice on how to smooth out some of the wrinkles. Lissy Rienow is the author of the book, The Heart of Your Teen, an insider look at the parent-teen relationship. Lissy, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Now, I like that. An insider look at the parent-teen relationship. Lissy, explain what motivated you to write the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually come from a big family, so I'm one of 7 kids, and my parents lead a ministry called Visionary Family. And so after high school, I actually took a gap year and I spent half the year at home working with my parents and working with their ministry. And it was really during that time that God really just put this passion on my heart for reaching out to teenagers and helping encourage teenagers in their family relationships. Because no matter what kind of family you have, family relationships are hard for everyone. And no matter what kind of phase of life you're at, and especially during the teen years. And so I kind of began on this journey of helping teenagers kind of look into their family relationships and ask the question, so what does it mean to live for Christ first at home with our families and then everywhere else? And so I began speaking to some youth groups and some churches. And that's when I got connected with a publishing company here in Nashville called Randall House. And Randall House had published a couple of my parents' books. And they reached out to me and they said, "Hey, Lissy, we'd be really interested in you doing a book project with us, but we don't want you to write a book for teenagers. We want you to write a book for parents on how to have a better relationship with their middle school, high school age child." And at first, I was not excited about the idea at all. I was like, I'm not a parent. I'm not an expert on parenting. I was like, maybe I could write a page about this, but
Sure.
there's no way it could be a whole book. But my parents really encouraged me and they were like, "Okay, Lissy, if God is opening up this door for you, then walk through it and see what happens."
So what are some of the biggest misunderstandings parents have about their teenagers besides defining what a clean bedroom should really look like?
Right. So the best part of this whole project actually was I got to interview teenagers from across the country and ask the question, so what did your parents do really well while you were in high school to help build a relationship with you? And what's one thing that you wish they had done differently? And some of the answers that I received absolutely blew me away. And that's what got me really excited about this book. And some of the things that teenagers said were like, "I really wish that my parents would ask me more intentional questions about my life. I really wish they taught me more accountability with my technology and my social media. I really wish my parents would pray more with us as a family or read the Bible more as with us as a family." And those answers were like across the board. And so as I started talking to more people and getting those responses, I was like, wow, this could be an incredible message for parents to hear from their teenagers about what they want in that relationship.
Now, you write that when parents give advice and instruction to their kids, sometimes it can maybe backfire a little bit unless it's done in a relational basis. Can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the whole premise of the heart of your teen is that this idea that relationship has to come before discipleship. So before parents could try and have a discipleship relationship with their child, there has to be the foundation of a loving relationship first. And so the first chapter of the book talks all about how parents can build the foundation of that relationship. And what the book calls it, I talk about what having a heart connected relationship looks like. So a heart connection relationship is one that's full of openness, honesty, trust, and love. So it talks a lot to parents about, okay, what's a great way that you can spend quality time with your teenager? Speak words of affirmation to your teenager. Have fun with them. Pursue their interests, like engage in what they love to do and help build the foundation of that relationship.
So how can you create a relationship that is a safe place for your teenager to talk about some key or controversial issues?
hmm So I talk about that a lot in a chapter that I write. And really, it's kind of a two-part issue. In talking to teenagers, I found that a lot of parents tend to be kind of on the extremes of certain things. So you have parents that are filled with a lot of grace for their kids to the point where maybe they're not pointing out certain issues that they might have. And then you have a lot of parents that maybe are full of a lot of truth, but don't have a lot of grace. And so, what I've found and what's been really helpful in my personal relationship with my parents is that there has to be that combination of grace and truth that pair together. So, parents that, you know, some things that my parents would tell me that really helped me in high school were, Lissy, we're committed to you. We love you. No matter what mistakes you make, no matter what you do in your life, we are always going to be committed to you in love. But they would also tell me some things that were really hard to hear sometimes and speak truth into my life where I needed to hear truth. So I really think that one of the most important aspects of having those difficult conversations is to have both the grace and the truth present.
Now, when it comes to parenting, discipline is also a big part of the relationship as well. I remember when my son was really young, really little, he hated, being put into the corner, staring at the walls when he did something he shouldn't do. He's like, this is driving me crazy. Please stop. I'm not going to do that ever again, right? Can you talk a bit about discipline versus the need for affirmation and encouragement?
Absolutely. So, one thing that I noticed in talking with teenagers is that a lot of them talked about how when they were little, their parents gave more direct consequences. So, you do something wrong, you get a consequence. But as they kind of grow up and as like we kind of become teenagers, the consequences decrease while the lectures increase. And oftentimes those lectures can be filled with a lot of anger, a lot of bitterness, a lot of annoyance, sometimes on both sides for the parent and for the teenager. And so something that a lot of kids said that as I was talking to them, they're like, I think that parents, if my parents gave me a direct consequence, that would actually preserve our relationship more, because those lectures, all that it's doing is pulling the hearts of teenagers and parents away from each other. Because when that anger gets in, when that bitterness gets in, when that defiance enters in, I think that that can be the real problem. And so for me and my parents, a lot of times if they gave me a direct consequence, it actually preserved our relationship better than them, you know, acting out of anger or giving me this long conversation.
Like a reactive reaction, knee-jerk reaction. How can parents effectively get their teens to take their faith seriously and really make it their own?
Yeah, well, I think that I've seen, just as I've been growing up and kind of diving into this topic more, and like I said, how I am not an expert on parenting. I am not a parent myself, so all I can really give is sort of just my observations of what I've seen and what's been really helpful for me. But something that impacted me the most as a teenager and as I've been kind of becoming more independent and making my faith my own is just, first of all, my parents communicating their commitment to me. That was huge. The next would be seeing the faith of my parents active in their own lives. When I come down in the morning to see my dad at the breakfast table with his Bible open and doing his devotions, or my mom sharing with me about how her faith is impacting her personal life. And then also my parents just being willing to allow me to make some decisions about my faith, to press into the fact, it's okay to have doubts sometimes. It's okay to question what you believe. It's actually a good thing to be able to wrestle through those feelings and decide for yourself what you believe. But something that my parents did that was so helpful was just they always communicated that if I was having those feelings or if I was having doubts, they were the safest people in the world for me to talk to about those things. And I could come to them with anything that I was feeling, and they would listen and be able to help me sift through that.
It's not uncommon for a teenager today to say to their parents, I'm not going to church anymore. That's it. I'm done. I'm out. How should parents really handle a situation like that?
I think that's really tough. And I also think it depends on the age of your child. Now, if the child is in middle school, if I were a parent, I would say, okay, if we're paying for your life, if you're living under our roof, you're going to come to church with us because that's what our family does. Now maybe your teenager is in college and independent and they're not wanting to go to church. Well, at that point, I don't know how much of the parents can force the child to do something, because at that point, you don't want to force your child to be a Christian or to actively live out their faith. It has to be a choice that they make for themselves. So I think a lot of it has to do with parents kind of offering that encouragement, again, offering that commitment, and going back to the base of that relationship. Because, if you have a healthy relational base with your teenager or with your child, no matter what age you are, it's going to be so much easier to have those types of conversations about faith and about church and all of that.
A lot of parents want respect from their teenagers, and I guess teens also want respect from mom and dad too. What needs to happen in order for mutual respect to be there?
You know, during my senior year of high school, God really just convicted me on exactly that issue. And I think it really has to do with the fifth commandment, the call to honor your father and mother. Because for a long time, growing up in my house, and my dad's a pastor, and I was always the good kid on the outside, like, all my teachers and all my friends would always be like, "Oh, Lissy, you're so great, you're so mature, you're so wise." But at home, my parents would be like, "Okay, Lissy, you were rude to your sister yesterday. We see you being a little selfish in these areas. We think you need to work on this, this, and this." And really, I think where God really convicted me the most was that, yes, I was obedient to my parents. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't going out and doing all these things. But the attitude of my heart was one of defiance and bitterness and selfishness. And so it's that piece of what is obedience versus honor, because honor starts in the heart and obedience overflows from that. But if I was having just the actions on the outside that were making me a good kid, but my heart was full of dishonor towards my parents. And so I think that that's something for parents who, even if they have kids that are really young, to be able to start discipling that. Because, my parents could tell if they told me to do something and I obeyed them but had a terrible attitude about it, they knew. And so I think parents can really start seeing that in their kids and start helping them disciple them in those areas.
Now let's talk a bit about social media and technology. What kinds of boundaries should parents be putting in place?
Well, you know how that is really a hard issue, because social media and technology it's everywhere for teenagers, and it's how we communicate, and it's just so ingrained in our lives. But what I talk about in the book, and there's a chapter on technology, is that really the key ingredient, and the key ingredient in our home was accountability. Because, as parents, you are never going to be able to keep absolutely all the junk outside of your child's life at all times. I mean, it's just impossible in the world that we live in. But in our house, we had to create this culture of accountability. And so when I got my phone, when I got my social media, my parents really communicated to me that, Lissy, your phone is not your private information. Like, we have the right to look at your phone at any time that we want. And even my dad, like, he would be like, look, Lissy, I don't even think that I'm above accountability. Like, I need, I have accountability partners, and I have, these internet blocking services. And so we want to work together to create an accountability atmosphere in our home, because, that we have this saying that no one is holy enough for a secret online life, whether you're a middle schooler or an adult.
Now, we should also probably talk a bit about dating and the challenges of remaining pure in a sex-saturated world, Lissy. What advice do you have
Yeah.
for parents and teenagers when it comes to sex?
I mean, that is a really tough question. And again, I think that it all goes back to that piece of the heart-connected relationship that you have with your child. And so I remember when I was in 8th grade, I think I had a crush on a boy at school. And I just really felt this like urge that I needed to be sharing those feelings that I was having with my dad, or just get some advice from him and talk to him. And I just remember having this like pit in the bottom of my stomach, like it was the last thing in the world that I wanted to do. It just absolutely made me sick. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I have a great relationship with my dad. I love my dad. I know my dad loves me. Why am I so afraid to talk to him about these things? And really, I have come to really believe that that was spiritual attack coming against the relationship that I had with my dad. And so I think so much of that dealing with relationships and sex and dating and all of that is, if kids feel like their parents are safe people to talk to, then, that's a win. That is a win for that relationship, because what the world is going to say is you to teenagers is you should talk to everyone else. You should talk to your friends, you should talk to your mentors, you should talk to your youth group leaders, but the last person in the world to talk to is your parents. Because there's that fear, that shame and embarrassment. And so I think if parents can really work through that and help build the relationship of trust and openness, that would be so helpful in navigating all of those relationships.
Lissy Rienow is the author of Heart of Your Teen, an insider look at the parent-teen relationship. Thanks a lot for joining us today from Nashville, Tennessee.
Thanks for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.